My name is Nora Bennett, and I never believed in ghosts until I moved to Haven Street. It wasn't supposed to be forever, just a temporary apartment while I figured things out. My photography work had slowed down, my relationship had ended, and I needed quiet. Haven Street was quiet, maybe too quiet. The first thing I noticed was how time didn't seem to move there. The trees didn't sway. The air always felt like it was holding its breath. The buildings leaned against each other like tired old men, and every window looked like an eye that had seen too much. Still, I told myself it was perfect for what I needed, a place to be invisible. I unpacked my camera first. It was old but familiar, a second-hand Nikon that had survived years of travel, heartbreak, and unpaid gigs. I set it on the window ledge, facing the empty street. Maybe I'd photograph decay, something raw, something human. On my first morning, I walked the block, camera in hand. The pavement cracked under my shoes. Half the houses were abandoned, the rest barely standing. But the light, it had a strange beauty, a golden tint that made even the dust shimmer. I lifted my camera and started shooting. There was something freeing about photographing silence. No models, no expectations. Just me, the street, and whatever stories the walls wanted to tell. That's when I noticed the window across the street. An old photography studio. At least, that's what it looked like. Faded letters above the porch spelled out Elms Photography. The windows were boarded, the door hanging crooked. But as I adjusted my lens, I saw movement behind the dusty glass. Just a flicker, like someone watching. When I lowered the camera, the movement stopped. I took a few shots anyway. The angle, the old signage, it was hauntingly beautiful. Later that night, when I reviewed the images, one made my breath catch. There was someone in the photo, a woman, standing behind the window. She was pale, her hair long, her dress white, like she'd been waiting for someone to notice her. I zoomed in, but the pixels blurred. Her eyes, though, they were sharp, focused, looking straight into the lens. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went back to the same spot, hoping to prove to myself it had been nothing. Maybe a reflection, a trick of light. But when I looked again, the window was empty, just darkness behind the glass. Still, something about it felt wrong, like the air around that building hummed with leftover energy. I took one step toward it, then another, until I was standing on the creaking porch. The door groaned when I pushed it, a deep wooden sound that seemed to echo down the street. Inside, everything was gray and still. Dust hung in the light like snow. There were old tripods, a broken chair, a few picture frames with the glass cracked. On the floor, I saw faded photos, faces of people long gone, but their smiles frozen in time. I picked one up, a family portrait, the kind you'd take in the 1960s. Mother, father, 2 kids, all dressed neatly. But their eyes were strange, not lifeless exactly, but hollow, as if the photo had captured something more than faces. I put it down and left, quickly. That night, I dreamed of that family. They were standing in my apartment. The same photo poses, the same empty eyes. Only this time, the woman from the window was there too. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and when I tried to move, my body wouldn't listen. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. I tried to shake it off. Bad dreams, imagination, the mind playing tricks. But something had changed. My apartment felt colder. like the warmth had been drained away. The lights flickered. My camera, sitting on the shelf, clicked once on its own, as if someone had pressed the shutter. When I checked, there was a new photo on the memory card. The street, my window, and through it, me, sleeping. I lived alone. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was a glitch, a timer I'd forgotten to turn off. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was wrong with that place. Still, I couldn't stay away. Haven Street had started to feel like it was pulling me in, one heartbeat at a time. Every photo I took began to show her, the woman in white. Faint at first, then clearer. Always standing just at the edge of the frame, like she was waiting for the right moment to step forward. I decided to find out who she was. The library was old and nearly empty, run by a thin man who seemed more dust than flesh. When I asked about Haven Street, he gave me a strange look. "That area?" he said, adjusting his glasses. "You sure you want to know?" "I'm doing a photography project," I lied. The city tried to redevelop it in the 70s. People wouldn't leave. Then fires started. Disappearances. The whole project was shut down. Disappearances. My stomach tightened. I opened the box. Inside were black and white photos of the street. Fresh paint. Children on bicycles. Neat gardens. And in one of them, behind a curtain in the window of Elm's photography, stood the woman in white. Same face. Same eyes. The caption said, "Property of H. Elm's Photography, 1963. Back home, I pinned that library photo to the wall beside the one I had taken. Decades apart, same woman. She hadn't aged. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. I lived on the top floor. Then the sound of a shutter. Click. I turned on the light. The photos on the wall were swaying, as if someone had brushed past them. The air was thick, heavy, like I was underwater. When I looked at the newest photo I'd printed that morning, I froze. The woman wasn't behind the glass anymore. She was standing in the middle of the street, and her face wasn't looking at me this time. It was looking past me, towards something behind my shoulder. I didn't turn around. The drive to Waverly Creek felt longer than it should have been. The GPS kept losing signal, and the road twisted through thick pine forests that seemed to lean in closer with every mile. My phone had no service, and the car's clock had stopped at 4:17. I didn't notice until much later that the second hand wasn't ticking anymore. The air smelled of wet earth and pine resin. The deeper I went, the fewer signs of life I saw. No gas stations, no houses, no traffic. Just the hum of my tires against the uneven road and the feeling that I was driving straight into something ancient. When I finally saw the mailbox with Waverly House, 41, carved into it, my chest tightened. The mailbox leaned to one side, rusted through, the paint peeling. I turned onto the gravel driveway, which was half swallowed by grass and mud. The house appeared slowly through the trees, 2 stories high, with a sagging porch and windows like blind eyes. It wasn't abandoned exactly. There were signs of care. The porch swept clean, the faint smell of smoke from a chimney, but it still felt forgotten by time. I parked, grabbed my small overnight bag, and hesitated at the steps. The wood creaked under my weight. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin, carried away by the wind. A woman appeared at the door, older, in her 50s maybe, with silver hair tied back in a neat bun. She wore a long gray dress, simple but clean. Her face had that calm, unreadable look of someone who's seen too much. "You must be Evelyn," she said softly. "You got the letter." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I'm sorry if I'm intruding," I began. "The letter said—" "I know what it said," she interrupted, gently. "Come in. You'll catch a cold out here." Inside, the house was dim and smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The floorboards groaned beneath a faded rug. A fire crackled in the living room, throwing orange light across a wall lined with old portraits. I noticed one of a young woman who looked eerily like me. The woman saw me staring. "That was Margaret," she said, "the last of the Waverly line before the house went quiet." "She looks familiar," I murmured. "Yes," the woman said with a faint smile. "They all do." She poured tea into mismatched china cups. The steam curled upward, sweet and herbal. "I'm Mrs. Alden," she said, "caretaker. Been here since, a long time now." "Was Margaret my relative?" I asked. Mrs. Alden looked at me carefully, then sipped her tea. "In a way, child, all who come here are connected." Something about the way she said it made the back of my neck prickle. She showed me to a small room upstairs. The wallpaper was faded blue, keeling in places, and a small wooden bed sat beneath the window. As I unpacked, I noticed a faint scratch mark on the floorboards, as if something had been dragged or hidden. When night fell, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too deep. I could hear the house breathing, the slow expansion of wood, the whisper of wind through the cracks, and underneath that, a faint sound. Someone humming. I sat up, straining to hear. The sound came from the hallway. I opened the door and peeked out. Nothing. The corridor was empty, the air cold. But as I turned back, something on the wall caught my eye. A new photograph, one that hadn't been there earlier that evening. It showed a woman standing by the porch steps, wearing the same coat I had on. The caption below read, "Evelyn Waverly, 2024. I froze. My throat tightened. I reached out to touch the frame. And my reflection in the glass looked slightly wrong. My eyes darker, my face thinner. Then I heard the voice again, closer this time. A whisper, almost kind. "Welcome home." I didn't sleep at all that night. Even after I blew out the candle and tried to close my eyes, that whisper echoed in my head. "Welcome home." At first, I told myself it was the wind. Old houses make noises. They creak, they sigh, they pretend to breathe. But there was something deliberate about that voice. Too human, too close. When dawn came, I went downstairs. The fire was out, but the ashes were still warm. Mrs. Alden was nowhere to be seen. I made myself some coffee from a tin on the counter and wandered into the sitting room. That's when I noticed the photographs again. There were dozens of them, men and women in black and white, posed stiffly, their eyes strangely intense. I recognized none of them, except Margaret, and now me. The photo from last night was still there, but something had changed. My expression in it was different. The corners of my mouth turned upward, ever so slightly, like a smile I hadn't made. I felt dizzy. I grabbed the frame, my hands shaking, and turned it over. The back was sealed, nailed shut, as if someone didn't want it opened. Then I saw something else on the wall behind it. Faint writing in pencil, half erased. It read, "She comes back every year." A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, heart hammering, but it was only Mrs. Alden. "Did you sleep well, dear?" she asked calmly. "I think so," I lied. "Who took these photographs?" "Oh, those? They've been here longer than I have." She smiled faintly. "Every guest leaves something behind." "What do you mean?" "Memories, faces, echoes," she said, turning toward the window. "This house remembers everything." Before I could ask more, there was a loud thud from upstairs. It sounded like something had fallen, hard. Mrs. Alden didn't flinch. "You'd best not go up there yet," she murmured. But I did. The hallway upstairs seemed darker than before, though sunlight filtered through the curtains. The air was thick and still. I followed the sound to the far end, where a narrow door stood slightly ajar. Inside was a small attic room, empty except for an old mirror leaning against the wall and a trunk in the corner. Dust motes floated in the air like tiny ghosts. I knelt and opened the trunk. Inside were scraps of old letters, a locket, and a diary wrapped in yellowed ribbon. The name on the cover made my blood run cold. Margaret Waverly. The first page was dated October 16th, 1924. Her handwriting was neat, almost elegant. "The voices have started again. They call to me at night from behind the walls. Mother says it's my imagination, but I've seen them move, the portraits. They watch. They remember." I kept reading, my hands trembling. Each entry grew darker. Fear, isolation, something unseen taking over her mind, until the last entry. "If anyone finds this, leave, before the house remembers your name." A sudden movement in the mirror caught my eye. I turned, expecting to see my own reflection, but it wasn't me. It was Margaret, her face pale, eyes wide, staring straight at me. Then she smiled, and her lips moved soundlessly. I stumbled back, slamming into the trunk. The mirror flickered like static, then went blank again. Just my reflection, terrified and shaking. When I looked down, the diary was gone. That night, I confronted Mrs. Alden. "What's happening here?" I demanded. "That mirror, those photos, they're changing." She didn't seem surprised. "You shouldn't have gone upstairs," she said softly. "Some things in this house aren't ready to be seen." I slammed the diary cover on the table, the one I thought had vanished. "Then tell me who she was. What happened to Margaret?" Mrs. Alden looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. "She wanted to leave," she said finally, "but the house wouldn't let her." "I don't understand," I whispered. "You will," she said. "Soon enough." She rose and left the room, her footsteps fading into the hallway. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring into the flames. When I finally went to bed, I found a note under my pillow. It was written in the same looping handwriting from the diary. "Evelyn, you can't leave either." Morning came gray and heavy. The light through the curtains looked tired, as if it had traveled too far to reach me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the note I'd found under my pillow. My name written in a hand that shouldn't exist. "Evelyn, you can't leave either." The paper smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. I wanted to believe Mrs. Alden had placed it there as some twisted prank, but deep down I knew better. The handwriting was Margaret's. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the old grandfather clock had stopped ticking. I found Mrs. Alden in the kitchen, staring out the window at the fog-covered garden. Her teacup sat untouched. "Mrs. Alden," I said softly, "we need to talk." She didn't turn. You read the note, didn't you? Yes. What does it mean? She sighed, then looked at me with a weariness I hadn't seen before. It means the house remembers you now. It won't forget. That doesn't make sense. I'm leaving today. I can't stay here another night. She shook her head. You can try, but the house won't let you. I wanted to scream at her, to demand she stop speaking in riddles, but the look in her eyes silenced me. It wasn't madness. It was pity. I packed my things anyway, my camera, my bag, the few clothes I'd brought. Every step toward the front door felt heavier. When I reached for the handle, something cold ran through me, like an invisible current. The metal turned warm beneath my fingers, then burning hot. I yanked my hand back with a cry. The doorknob glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, just as suddenly, it cooled. I tried again. The door wouldn't move. I threw my shoulder against it. Nothing. It didn't even rattle. It was as if the house itself had sealed shut. That's when I heard it. A voice, whispering from the walls, my name, Evelyn. The sound came from upstairs, the attic. I didn't want to go there. Every instinct screamed at me not to. But something inside me, curiosity, fear, or maybe that strange pull the house had, made me climb. The door to the attic was closed now. When I touched the knob, it was freezing. I turned it slowly and stepped inside. The mirror stood in the center of the room. The trunk was gone, and in the mirror, someone stood behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I looked back, the reflection remained, a shadowed figure of a woman. She stepped closer, her face slowly emerging from the dim light. Margaret. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear. Then her hand pressed against the glass, and suddenly I could. Help me. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear. Then her hand pressed against the glass, and suddenly I could. Help me. The voice filled the room, soft, desperate, layered with echoes, as if it came from 1,000 places at once. I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose floorboard. My hand brushed something beneath it, a small key, rusted and cold. When I looked up, Margaret was gone. Only my reflection stared back, pale and terrified. I took the key downstairs, unsure why. Maybe I hoped it would open the front door, but something told me it belonged somewhere else. I walked through the hallway, past the portraits, all of them watching me. Their eyes seemed to follow as I moved, faint smiles appearing and disappearing on their faces. At the end of the hall, behind the staircase, I found a narrow door I hadn't noticed before. It was locked. The key fit perfectly. When the door opened, a rush of cold air hit me. The space beyond was small and dark. A hidden cellar with stone walls and a single lantern flickering weakly. The smell of damp earth filled my lungs. On the floor lay a pile of old photographs, dozens of them. Some were faded, some torn, some burned at the edges. I picked one up, a woman in a long dress standing by the mirror. Margaret. Another, Mrs. Alden, younger, standing beside her. And then, me. It was impossible, but there it was, my own face. Same clothes, same hair. Only the background was older, like decades had passed. I felt something behind me, a presence, a breath on my neck. Do you see now? The voice was faint, almost kind. We all stay. I turned slowly. Mrs. Alden stood in the doorway. her eyes glistening with tears. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "Every visitor leaves something behind. A name, a face, a moment they can't escape." "Why me?" I choked out. She looked at the photograph in my hand. "Because you came looking for a story. The house gave you one." The lantern flickered and went out. In the dark, I could hear whispers, dozens of them, rising from the walls, the floors, the ceiling, all saying the same thing: "Stay." When I woke, I wasn't sure if I had slept or simply lost consciousness. The cellar was gone, or maybe I was. I found myself back in the parlor, seated by the fire, my camera on the table beside me. It was as if the night before had been erased. Mrs. Alden stood near the window, her back to me. The morning light fell across her gray hair like silver threads. "What happened?" I asked, my voice small. She didn't answer. I stood, dizzy and weak. The air smelled faintly of lavender again, the same scent from the note, from Margaret's diary. My hands trembled as I reached for my camera. The last photograph I had taken, the one of my reflection, was still inside. I turned the small dial and looked through the viewfinder. The image appeared, but it wasn't me behind the lens anymore. It was Margaret, standing in the same place, wearing my coat, holding my camera. My heart stopped. "Mrs. Alden," I whispered, "what's happening to me?" She turned at last, her expression sad but calm, like someone watching the tide pull something precious away. "The house keeps what it needs to remember," she said. "It takes the ones who see it too clearly. You saw her, didn't you, in the mirror?" "I'm not her," I said. "I'm not." "No," she said softly. But she wasn't her either. Not in the end. The fire crackled. The wind pressed against the window panes, and for a second, I thought I heard voices in the gusts. Faint laughter, faint sobbing, blending into the sound of the flames. I ran to the door again. It opened this time. Outside, the sky was a deep blue. The trees swayed quietly in the morning wind. It was over, I told myself. I could leave. I could drive away. Forget the house. Forget everything. But as I reached the car, I turned back. In the window of the parlor, someone was standing. A woman, still as a photograph. Her hand rested against the glass, her face hidden in shadow. For a moment, I thought it was Mrs. Alden, but then she stepped into the light. It was me. Not quite, not now. The reflection of who I had been, looking out at the world like she wished she could step into it again. Her eyes met mine, and something inside me broke. I raised my hand, and she did the same. Then the window went dark. I got in the car and drove. Faster than I should have, down the narrow road that led away from Waverly Creek. I didn't look back again. For days afterward, I tried to tell myself it had been a dream. Exhaustion, isolation, an overactive mind. But sometimes at night, when I close my eyes, I hear the click of a camera shutter in the dark. Weeks later, the photographs I'd taken were developed. Most were blank, but one, just one, showed something that shouldn't exist. It was the parlor of the old house, empty except for the faint figure of a woman near the window. She was holding a camera. I never went back to Haven Street. The house still stands there. I checked once on a map, though the listing says abandoned. Sometimes I think about Mrs. Alden and whether she's still there, waiting for the next name, the next face, the next story to remember. And sometimes I dream I'm back inside. The light through the curtains, the smell of smoke and lavender, the mirror waiting in the attic, When I wake, I always leave the lamp on, because I know the house can still find me in the dark. And yet, a part of me still wonders, if I went back, if I faced it, if I understood what it wanted, maybe I could free her. Maybe I could free myself. Until then, the photograph sits on my desk. Every few days, it changes. A new shadow, a new smile. And sometimes, when the room is very still, I swear I hear a voice whisper, gentle and far away, "Welcome home, Evelyn."